All right, we are recording, everyone. So we're going to make sure we have our microphones on mute. Okay, got me all there. Good morning, all. Let me make a few announcements. Let's go to your class page and get caught up. This is week 3. Let me see if I can. All right, everyone. Hopefully you can see me sharing my screen. Good morning. Today is Wednesday, the 20th of October. And we are in week 3. I want to go over week three's assignments, and then I got just about 2 announcements. The assignments for this week, we're in chapter 4, Genesis. So make sure you're reading chapter 4, Genesis in your book. I tried to copy some pages. If you still don't have the book, right here where my cursor is, I scanned some. Can't scan all of it because of copyright laws, but I tried to get some. I know we have a couple of students that are still waiting for their books to come from Amazon. Also, down here at the bottom is just a video that I did a couple of years ago about Genesis, and you can watch that if you would like. Also, I did include some background information about the patriarchs that we will be introduced to in the book of Genesis. It is a video. I believe this is a video, and this is not a video, but it's more supplemental reading for you if you would like, and it is entitled "Who is Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph?" All right, so let's go to your 2 assignments. The first one I want to talk about, is your week 3 discussion on Genesis. Your discussion form comes from, number 4, question number 4 on page 97. And the question reads, why would God use multiple names in Genesis? Why would God use multiple names in Genesis and also elsewhere in the Old Testament? So when we say multiple names, and this will be covered in the book of Genesis, it'll be covered in chapter 4, your reading of Genesis. I want you to pay attention to why would the authors record the creator God's name in as different names. So it may be God, it may be Lord, it may be Jehovah, it will be different names of the creator God in Genesis. And I don't want to give it all away, but why do you think that would be? All right, so I want you to complete that discussion form, engage your classmates. Remember, make sure that your form is informed. These are like quizzes each week. So I'm checking to see if you have read your chapter. And when you read that chapter, it will give you lots of answers to help you to complete the week 3 discussion post. All right. And then one more thing I want to talk about that's due this week is the Old Testament genre chart assignment. Old Testament genre chart assignment. That particular assignment is an attachment, and you're going to, let me see if I can open it up. You may not be able to see that attachment. May have to, let me see if I can open it up. Students, let me know if you can see the Old Testament genre chart document on the screen.
Cannot see it.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like when let me do it again. When I open a document, it doesn't go with me. All right, how about now?
No, I see a blank screen.
Hmm. Microsoft Teams can sometimes be really weird. I'm gonna try one more time. Let's see. It can be really weird. All right. Let me know if you see it. If not, I'll talk through it.
I cannot see it.
Oh no. This is not good. Okay. Um, Students, I do not understand why my technology is not sharing things on the screen. That's not good. Um, However, when you go to week 3, there is going to be your Old Testament genre chart assignment. You're going to click on that assignment and it's going to be a document, okay? And you are going to save it to your computer and you can type in it. When we say genre, when we say genre, there are different types of books in the Old Testament. They're going to fall under different categories. For example, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. I'm not going to give it away because that's going to be your homework that you're going to use your book and you can use your research to find out what genre, what family it falls up under. And then there are, and I'm sorry you can't see this, this is really bothering me. And then there are going to be from Joshua to Esther, that is another genre. From Job to Song of Solomon, that is another genre. From Isaiah to Daniel, those are prophetic writings. What you're going to tell me what type of prophetic writings those are. And from Hosea to Malachi. Okay. And I do apologize. I'm not sure what is going on with our Microsoft Teams. We have to see what's going on with that. But you're going to click on that assignment in D2L. You're going to save it to your computer. You're going to use your textbook and your research. Find out what genre, what category those books fall under. I'm trying to give it away, but I'm not going to give it away because you're going to do your research and you're going to find out what category they fall under. Some are going to be like prophetic, some are going to be historical, okay? Some are going to fall under the Pentateuch. So you're going to figure out which one goes into which family goes into which category.
So
Any
Dr.
question?
Professor Barry, so that was not necessarily in chapter 4, because I was beginning to do it and I didn't
Not
see.
necessarily in chapter 4, no.
Okay.
So thank you. Use your text as well as research. You're going to find out genres. You're going to find out what type of genre or category those groups go under. All right, you guys all right? Okay. Let's test this out. Let me know if you can see my screen.
I can see your screen.
All right, does it say Old Testament genre chart assignment?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
Yes.
well, look. All right, wonderful. Something's working here. I don't know what it is. When I went to that document, it just didn't like it. All right, everybody, we're going to go into Genesis chapter 4. I'm going to pull up this PowerPoint. Y'all just stay right there with me. Let me know when you can see it. All right, somebody give me a thumbs up or just tell me if you can see on the screen Genesis chapter 4.
I can see it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, makes me feel better. We can see something on the screen here. All right, everyone. We're in your book in chapter 4 and in the first book of the Bible. Now, we are going to I should have pulled this up on the screen. We're going to do a little bit of reading today. And you can do this also on your own a little bit later. And for my students who are watching the video and you're not here with us, I want you to read chapters 1 and chapter 2. Okay. For those people who are watching the video, I want you to go ahead and read chapter 1 and chapter 2 in Genesis. All right. So this is what we are going to do virtually. I'm going to pull it up. Let's see here if I can pull this up here. I'm going to pull it up so that we can read together. And we are going to put our examination glasses on. Okay, give me 1 second and I'll share my screen. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 1. All right, I'm coming back to you. I'm going to share it on the screen, okay? Let me know when you can see it. All right. Can somebody see Genesis chapter 1 on the screen?
I can see it.
Super. All right. All right, everybody. Now, this might take a little time, but the reason why we're walking through this is because I want you to see something. So whether you have your own personal Bible or you're going to follow along with us on the screen. All right, here we go. We're in Genesis chapter 1. And I'm going to get some folks to help me out with some reading. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God said that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. All right, help me out. Can somebody pick up verse 6 and read down to 13, please?
Okay, I'll read it. And God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky. And there was evening and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lee. All right. I need another reader. Can I get someone to read verses 14 through 19? I know this is long. I just want you to see something. Who's going to pick up 14 through 19?
I will.
Thank you.
And God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years, and let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser night to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day.
All right. So far we're talking about creation. The creator God is making the world. We're up to the fourth day. I know you like, what are we doing here? I just want you to see something. I'm gonna pick up here on verse 20. And God said, let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing with which the water teems and that moves about in it according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning. All right, so we made it up to the fifth day. We got 2 more days to go. Somebody pick up for me can you do verse 24 through 26?
Okay. And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move around the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that moved along the ground according to their kind. And God saw that it was good. Did you say, go how far?
You could go to 26. That's fine. Keep going.
Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the seas and the birds in the skies, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground.
Awesome. Okay. We keep moving. We keep moving. So in verse 27, God creates male and female. He created them. I'm just speeding up a little bit. Verse 28, he tells them to be fruitful and multiply. I'll pick up on 29. Then God said, I give you every seed bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and to all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. Okay, watch this, verse 31. We're at the end of chapter 1. God saw all that he made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. All right. I know you said, oh, that was a lot. That was 31 verses. That was chapter 1. If we sum up chapter 1, what just happened? What's your summary of chapter 1? What occurred?
God,
Creation.
Creation. Very good. Creation. God created heavens and earth and some people, right? All
and
right. Over a span of how many days?
7, 6.
Well, 6. And then created God rested. All right. Very good. So you got the summary of chapter 1. And then we're going to come up here to chapter 2. I'm walking you through something here. Chapter 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array by the seventh day. So we're on 7. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Does that seem like the end of a story? Not the end of a story, but kind of like a conclusion. All right. So just hang with me. Put on your study cap. Now we're going to go to verse 4. We're in chapter 2. We're in verse 4. Look at verse 4. Look how it starts off. This is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created. When the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Now no shrub had yet appeared on the earth, and no plant had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not sent rain on the earth, and there was no and there was no one to work the ground, but streams came up from the earth and watered the whole surface of the ground. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Let's just stop it. Stop right there. You see anything that was interesting? In chapter 2, it's almost as if the writers add in another story. So here we have in verse 7, I wish I could highlight this here. Then the Lord formed a man. But wait a minute. Can I go back on this thing? If I can go back. If you have your paper Bible, it's easy to go back, right?
Yeah.
But wait a minute. Back
Up to
in,
27.
thank you.
Mhm.
Back in chapter 1, verse 27.
Actually, 26. I'm sorry. Start at 26.
You are correct. You are correct. Thank you. Who was that? Verse 26, correct. Verse 26, then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so on and so forth. And then in verse 27, so God created mankind in his own image, in the image of God. He created them, male and female. He created them. Then he gives them directions in verse 28 and verse 29. My goodness. And then we go all the way. I'm going to go to chapter 2 again, okay? Then we get into chapter 2. It's weird when you got it on the screen, but if you got it open in your hand, right? When we go to chapter 2, verse where was I? Verse 4?
7.
No, verse 7. Thank you. Verse 7. All right, so this is what we mean by studying the Old Testament. It seems like somebody mute your microphone. It seems like somebody got it going on. Somebody mute your microphone, okay? All right. So what we find sometimes many times in Old Testament writing is not necessarily conflict, but multiple stories, because the stories are not in conflict with each other, but multiple stories. So now it seems in chapter 2 that we have another story of creation. The Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils, gives more detail about how this man became a living being, and so on and so forth. I won't go too much more into it, but I just want to pause. Let's talk about that real quick. I'm going to pull up our PowerPoint. Let's talk about that. Have you ever noticed that before? Let me go back to your PowerPoint. Have you ever noticed those two versions? And not that they're wrong. They're not in conflict with each other. But there are two stories of creation.
Professor Berry,
Yes.
it seems like in the first one, it's just giving you a general description of what happened, of what took place. God created heaven and earth. And over in that second chapter, it's like someone tells you, I went to the mall yesterday. But in the second chapter, they tell you what street they took and which turn they made and where the red lights were and all of that.
I agree. So that first one in chapter 1 was more general, although we got good details, right? We got good details. And
Yes.
then chapter two, and I'm in my textbook, chapter 2 gave us lots of details regarding man and the creation of man and the tenderness that the Creator God took in creating man. So as you look at the structure, I'm on page 85 of your textbook. As you look at the structure of the introduction of the book of Genesis, the key thing that the authors want to get is creation. The key thing that the authors want to tell you is that who is responsible for creation? By reading those two chapters, who do you think the author of Genesis is saying this is who created all the stuff?
God himself.
God.
God. So the author or authors, because remember, y'all, we don't really know exactly if it was one person or many people, but the author or authors are driving it in. This is the first book of the Bible, and they're going to bring it all the way back. This is how it was created. This is a story of origins and beginnings. This is a story of how things got started, how the world got started, how people were created, the relationship of people with the Creator God. So Genesis is, yes, it's the first book. Yes, it's a book of beginnings, but yes, it's also a foundational book. You wonder, if people wonder and say, "Ooh, what can we say about the Creator God?" We can go back to Genesis, a creator, uh, one who wanted to establish relationship with individuals. And we also see the foundation of Judaism start to come through. We also see foundation of the Christian faith, because those Jewish patriarchs are going to lay the foundation for what the Christian faith will believe. When we talk about authors in the Old Testament, and especially for Genesis, this is probably the oldest book. Y'all, we just really don't know. It's attributed to Moses. It could be Moses. It could be Moses and friends. It could have been somebody else, but we are just really not sure about who exactly wrote the book of Genesis. Okay. Just really don't know. And so many times with Old Testament authors, we just kind of give a roundabout, what's the word? They attribute it to someone. But when you're doing your teaching and your studying, you could say it was attributed to Moses, but Moses may not have had all of the authorship to himself. Okay. All right. So now, when we talk about the Genesis story or the story of beginnings, there is a lot of links to literature at that time. And I know you may be thinking like, who was writing books at that time? There was not necessarily like writing books like we have them today, but there was literature or stories that were told in the ancient Near East during that time that had similarities to many stories in Genesis. All right. Now, I want to share this one with you. If you look on the screen, there is a story from the ancient Near East, near Mesopotamia. And they said that this story was written around 2000 BC. It was a long time ago. And it's called the Atrahasis Epic. Atrahasis Epic. And did you know that particular story contained a story talking about a flood and destruction, excuse me, of the world? And this particular story sounded very familiar, similar to the flood that we find in the book of Genesis that occurred with, Noah and building the ark and things like that. So I want to also bring you to literature. So there were also stories that were going around during this particular time that had similarities to what occurred in Genesis. Now, I want you to, I hope that you can see this. Somebody tell me if you can see my chart on the screen.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, wonderful. Now, if you still have your Bible open, if you have your paper Bible with you, or if you're watching this video, you can do this later. Now, Genesis has, you can see it on the screen, how many chapters? It's a long book.
Looks like 50.
50, very good. It's a long book. And it's a historical book. The people in this book were real people. You could research them. Okay. So, but it's interesting to see how the book evolves. So you can put your finger on the screen, you can move around. Okay. So if you go to the top of the screen, let me see where it's chapters 1 and 2 go through creation. Remember, we walked through that. Then it didn't take the people long, right? Chapters 3 through 5 talks about the fall of the humans. So that was Adam and Eve. They thought they were wise and going to eat this fruit. They fall into sin. And that sin is now placed upon human beings. Then we get the flood, this great flood, and characters Noah comes in. Then from them is God says, okay, look, I'm gonna work with y'all now. And come nations of people that the creator God is going to bless. Now, over the following last group here on my right hand side, you have Abraham, Isaac, you're introduced to Jacob, and later on Joseph. These four gentlemen are considered the patriarchs. Okay, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. Now, if you look over here on the left-hand side and the right, okay, of the chart, we see the beginning of humans, what's called the human race. And then on the other side, kind of like they put like a division of Genesis. We see how the creator God still works with these people, but now these individuals are the beginning of what was called the chosen. In the beginning, we see a lot of confusion because of sin with the people. And then towards the end of the book of Genesis, my goodness, they find themselves in bondage in Egypt. And then we'll begin to talk more about that in the Pentateuch as these Jewish people or Israelite people are trying to work their way out of it, and they're going through lots of oppression. Okay. All right, so I won't go through everything on this list, but it would be good if you just take your Bible and thumb through it. Just thumb through it. Thumb through the book of Genesis. And you see the first couple of chapters of creation, and then take it all the way down to the end, and you're introduced to your patriarchal foundation. All right, y'all. How we doing with time? All right. With every book of the Old and New Testament, there is a purpose. Okay, there is a purpose. So every book was not just written just for happenstance, but every book was placed in the canon for a reason. All right. What is the purpose of the book of Genesis? Y'all can jump in here, especially if you're familiar with reading things in Genesis. One of the purposes is to tell how God came to choose Abraham and his family. Okay. Y'all remember the song like Father Abraham? Abraham is considered a patriarch a father figure of the Christian and Hebrew faith. And so Genesis paints the picture of how Abraham was chosen because of his faithfulness, and how generations after generations were blessed through him. Okay. Genesis is an important book because it introduces us to who God is. Jot that down. Who God is. Another word that we will also see for the creator God is Yahweh. Yahweh. Okay. Now, you can open up your microphones here as well through your research, or maybe you may have done your reading of chapter 4, or maybe you have heard some things about the book of Genesis. What would you add here would also be a purpose or message that you found in this book? Remember, we said origins in the beginning. Anybody else want to add? Go ahead.
The covenant.
Covenant. Tell me a little bit more about covenant, James.
Well, according to the author or reading after the fall, God wanted to reestablish the relationship
Yes.
and use the covenant, and much of the not only Genesis but the Old Testament is the degree that God would go through.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can't hear
Okay.
James.
Okay.
I can hear you.
James froze. Okay. I was
Yeah.
getting scared. All right. Hopefully he will be able to come back. We were shared. Okay, James, you're back. I think you froze a little bit.
I did. Am I back? Okay. Well, we were
Yes. Start over.
from the reading that the covenant that within Genesis and the Old Testament, that once the fall occurred, God would use the covenant to reestablish. And much of the Old Testament is showing us the lengths and that God would go to in order to maintain the covenant, even though people would mess up.
Right. Very good. Covenant is introduced in the book of Genesis. Love is introduced in the book of Genesis. Very good. And the creator God keeps giving chances and chances and chances to the humans. And the humans are just like, yeah, we'll do right. And then they don't. Oh, we'll do right, Lord. And then they don't. But the creator God always put something in place for them to get right. And the creator God didn't want to leave them alone. Very good. Anybody else want to jump in there? All right. Okay. I heard somebody.
Yeah, one other thing that I saw was interesting is the way the author put together this chapter.
Yes.
And talked about the obstacles that would occur, and starting from almost the beginning, when the obstacles that would occur to to be able for the promise to come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
And that so he looked at, for instance, when they went to Egypt, and the Pharaoh saw Sarah.
Yes.
Then they were able to get over that. Then there had the case with Lot, whether it was going to go through him, but something occurred. So it seems like there were constant obstacles that
Awesome.
would get in the way of the promise being kept. And then they would go away and something else would come up and it would go away. So it was sort of interesting reading, almost like a movie, if you would,
It is.
that on how, you know, a challenge would come and it would become over, God would overcome it. A challenge and
That's a good point. That's a very good point. And also, let me add in there, as James was talking about the people and these challenges. For example, I'm on page 87 of your textbook. Let's say, for example, Abraham and Sarah, right? Many of us may be familiar with that story of faith and believing. And they were old in age, and the creator God says, "You're gonna have a baby, Sarah." She's like, "What are you? You gotta." She laughed. It says, said she laughed, and um, we learn different stories from these patriarchal individuals, Sarah and Abraham, of having faith, of not knowing where you're going, and the Creator God sends them somewhere. But we see that when God sends them to a different place, it's not a place that hurts them, but it is a place of blessing.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Now, let me see here. It's 11:45. All right, let's see. I'm going to speed up just a little bit in essence of time. Genesis also introduces sin. This is where we get the word. This is where we're introduced to this character of the serpent. This is where we are introduced to good and evil and having knowledge that we need to follow, or that humans need to follow a particular way. We could talk about this all day, of how Adam and Eve fell, and that fall into sin impacted humanity to come. Us, and all the people that's going to come after us, came before us, were impacted and fell into simple situations from time to time. But, however, God shows us in the book of Genesis that even though people would do things wrong or do wrong things, they could be better people. And I heard the word covenant and relationship, that when they get into covenant or relationship, that there is a, what's the word, a breach that can be repaired. Okay. So remember, Genesis introduces the fall. Genesis is the first book. Genesis introduces sin. Okay. All right. We already did Cush from last week. Okay. So, all right. So this is what we're going to do. Okay, we're good. This is what we're going to do um, in this part of our session. Now, I had a couple of exercises here, but I want to skip down to the third bullet. If you have, I'm going to pick up my Bible real quick. Let me go get my Bible off of the bookshelf. And we are, students, going to identify some characters of the patriarchs in Palestine. So we're going to skip down to chapter 11. I'm going to get my Bible. So if you have your Bible, all right. So if you have your Bible, whether you are watching with us, if you have it on your phone, or if you have it paper version, and what I want you to start doing is just beginning to, it's hard to read everything. I'm not asking you to read things word for word, word for word, chapter by chapter, but it is good to learn people. Okay. All right. So if you're with me, I want you to go to Genesis chapter 11. Genesis chapter 11. And then when you get there, I want you to scroll down to verse 27. Genesis chapter 11. And then I want you to scroll down to verse 11. Excuse me, 27. Genesis 11 and 27. So we're being introduced to some new characters here. And I'm going to read from, I've got New International Version. It says, this is the account of Terah. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran became the father of Lot. You heard of Lot before? While his father Terah was still alive, Haran died in Ur of the Chaldeans in the land of his birth. Abram and Nahor both married. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. Heard of her? And the
Yes.
name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. May have heard of her too. She was the daughter of Haran, the father of both Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai, was barren. She had no children. So let's just pause right there. That introduces us. Genesis is going to introduce us to a lot of names, a lot of characters, but a lot of individuals. Don't want to call them characters, but we are now introduced to Abram and Sarai. And then later, through their interaction with the Creator God, they had a name change to Abraham and Sarah. All right, now I want you to head down to chapter 37. Chapter 37. Chapter 37. And you're just going to take your finger, and what I want you to do is, and I know you can't read everything, but now we're introduced to Joseph. And I want you to see some key things. Joseph is now moving down to an area called Egypt. Y'all remember last week we said Egypt is located where? What continent should I say?
Africa.
There we go. So north, what would that be? Northeastern side of Africa. So we want to remember that. Remember location, y'all. We're going to be introduced to Joseph. Here is, if you get a chance, this is one of the most, I think it is, one of the most awesome narratives and stories of faith where Joseph is sold by his brothers. Y'all can read that a little bit later. I want you to flip over to chapter 38. We're going through this study so you can identify the structure of the book. For men and women, I want you to look at Judah, the story of Judah and Tamar. This is an interesting story. You can take a look at that later. Judah and Tamar. We're just flipping through for structure. And so you're going to see these stories continue with Joseph all the way down, go down to the end of go down to the end of the book to Genesis 50. What happens with Joseph? We're just looking for structure. What happened to Joseph at the end of chapter 50?
He reunited with his dad and his brothers.
He did, but keep going. At the end of 50, bad thing, really.
Oh, that's where he
That's
died.
when he died.
Correct. There you go. Yes. All right, very good. So I wanted you to thumb through, and you can do this even after we get off today. I want you to thumb through the book of Genesis. Not necessarily, no, you don't have to read all the chapters. It's 50 something chapters, but we did that exercise to look at the structure. We started off with creation. We did that in the beginning. We started off talking about who the top patriarchs. We talked about Abraham, um, Joseph. You'll see Isaac to be introduced. Okay. And then we end a lot with the last about 20 or so chapters focusing on Joseph. Okay. Now, with still in chapter 4 of your textbook, should I say? With the book of Genesis, I like how I think James said it's like a movie. It really is, y'all. And it is a movie of history. You know, if we were to put this together, it's a movie of history. These are actual places, actual people that occurred and that lived. There are places. Let me see, I'm in my textbook. Okay, I'm in my textbook on page 89, and one of the things I wanted to bring out is places in the book of Genesis. I know some of you are teachers and some of you are preachers, some of you are scholars. Pay attention to places in the book of Genesis. For example, Abraham digs this well on page 89. There's a picture of what it probably is. Abraham dug a well at the places, I believe it's Beersheba, and it is told that that well is still there today. So locations are really big. Um, one more thing before we go. In your text. I wanted to pull out one more thing. Oh, yes, this is what I wanted to pull out, y'all. Okay. In the book of Genesis, here's the key thing, too. I wanted to bring this up. Monotheism. Monotheism. Anybody know what that means?
That's one God, isn't it?
One God. Very good. Monotheism. And in the book of Genesis, you are introduced to one God creating the world, creating things, creating people and plants and animals. All goes back to the book of Genesis, really hones into monotheism, that one creator is responsible for this. All right, there's so much that I want to get into, but I can't get it all. I want to pause right here. Any questions? Any questions so far on Genesis? Okay. So one key thing, remember we talked about, and you're going to look into this more in your discussion post, is we're going to see different names for God. Yahweh, um, in the book, El Shaddai, page 92. Um, okay. And one other thing, and we're going to get into this a little bit later, the Jewish patriarchs would not even really call God by name because it was just too much, too strong of a word for them to utter, and they felt that it was impolite or irreverent to do so. So sometimes you will see in Jewish writings, it'll be Y, a dash, dash. Sure, I got Y, a dash, right. You'll see H, a dash, and then maybe a W, a dash, and another H, but they will not write out Yahweh. They will not write out the entire word Yahweh because they just feel like it's just too strong or that it would be irreverent to do so. All right. All right, everybody. I love this chapter. It's going to give you a lot of good information upon creation, um, how the created God shows up in the book of Genesis, how the created God interacts with humans, interacts with nature, um, continues to build relationships with them. And that foundation that we see in Genesis with the creator God and with humans, I like that word, with covenant, with relationship, with introducing love. You're going to see the same thing in each book of the Old Testament. Right. All right. So let me just pause. Any questions for me? All right. All right, everyone. So remember your genre assignment and discussion post due Sunday night, 11:59. All right, everybody. All right. Take care. Have a good one. And to those who are watching virtually, if you have any questions, please let me know.
All right. See you later.
All right. Have a
Right.
good
Have
one.
a
Have a
great
great
day.
day.
You too. Have a good one.